Chapter 1. Zack crumples up the 50th piece of paper and tosses it aside. He has been struggling since yesterday to find the right headline for this week's newspaper issue, but nothing seems to fit. Why did Paul have to leave now? He would have known exactly what to do, Zack thinks bitterly. Then again, maybe not, Zack thinks, granting himself a measure of grace. He cannot recall a time when Tef has ever been tasked with crafting an uplifting story for the devastated citizens of Freedom State. What can the title possibly be? All is not lost? How can he write that when thousands of lives were lost, entire towns reduced to rubble, schools, hospitals, malls, all gone? Zack groans in frustration, reaching for his 5th cup of coffee this morning. He drags himself toward the boardroom for the team check-in, hoping someone, anyone, has found a way to bring hope to a hopeless situation. Truth Equals Freedom, or TEF, is the only news outlet in all of Freedom State, a singular voice in a nation on edge. Every citizen in Freedom State waits eagerly for TEF's weekly paper, hanging on every word, but this week, Zack fears they will be disappointed once again. Again, because last week's issue had the title, Enemies in the Bag Guaranteed. Then 5 days later, what? We Will Rise Again? Revenge in the Bank? Zack is just clueless. He isn't in great shape himself. His boss and mentor, Paul Fisher, was shot while covering the war. Since then, no TEF reporter had been permitted to replace Paul at the front lines. No one had been allowed to cover the story firsthand. The scramble for answers is fruitless. How can the one news outlet in the country report on the war when they do not even know what happened themselves? Mr. President is silent. Even his assistant, who had always sent updates for TEF to report on the war, is quiet. By tomorrow, they will have to pull something together. Friday is approaching fast, and the streets of Freedom State need to hear from TEF. It is the next morning. Zack wakes up to an email from Mr. President's assistant. An electric energy buzzed in the air of the TEF building, starkly reversing the gloomy confusion of the previous day. The writers are already hard at work, bustling about as they piece together the newspaper articles. Mr. President's message is clear. The enemy was a coward who dared not face his opponent directly, but instead called upon his gang, other nations, to join the fight. He didn't fight fairly. He lacked the integrity and honor that Mr. President embodies. Thus, the title of the first article is decided: Coward versus Man of Integrity. The second piece is a heartfelt letter to all the families who have lost loved ones, jobs and businesses. The citizens of Freedom State are encouraged to volunteer their skills to help rebuild what has been lost. From ashes we rise. The article, penned by the most emotional and passionate writers at TEF, captures the spirit of resilience. The third article features a speech from the president, starting with a vehement denouncement of the enemy and culminating in a message of vengeance. He has an ace up his sleeve that is going to leave the enemy and his allies in utter shock. Smirk Off, a title suggested by the president himself, concludes the final article. Chapter 2. You should be ashamed of yourself, Patrick. Your father must be rolling in his grave, Mr. President's mother says as she spits on the carpet. Her voice is laced with venom. She leans heavily on her walking stick and, with a final glance of disgust, hobbles out of the study. Sandra, Mr. President roars, his voice echoing through the room as he summons one of the maids. Get this carpet out and wash it. Immediately. It was just changed this morning, sir, Sandra replies hesitantly. Can't you see that slimy green mess on it? Get the bloody rug out, now, Mr. President barks, his face twisting with disgust. Mr. President shoots up from his chair, storming out of the room and marching toward the master bedroom with a furious intensity. Bang! He slams the door behind him, his hands already outstretched, trembling with rage as he closes in on his wife. He wraps his hands around her neck, violently shaking her awake from her peaceful sleep. What did I ever see in you? He hisses. Iris jolts awake, gasping for breath, her eyes wide with terror, bulging as she struggles beneath his grip. Patrick, she chokes out, barely able to form the words. Mr. President releases her, letting her gasp for air. How did I not see it before? He snarls. You are a loose-mouthed woman, a traitor to your own husband. You are just like the enemy. That mouth of yours should be ripped off. It's the ugliest thing about you, spewing treason like that. Iris stands in shock, tears streaming down her face as she rubs her bruising neck, her breaths coming in sharp, ragged gasps. My mother is your mother-in-law, not your friend, he sneers, pacing around the room. What possessed that waterlogged head of yours to tell her how we actually lost the war? Now she must die, and her blood will be on your hands. Mr. President says. With a final spit on the floor, he storms out of the room. Sandra! Where is that girl? Mr. President shouts again, his voice cold and sharp. Get the rug out of the bedroom too and fetch your madam some water. Later, Mr. President summons the chef, speaking in low, private tones. The next morning, Mr. President's mother is rushed to the hospital under mysterious circumstances, and Iris is quietly taken to the Cuckoo Clinic for rehabilitation. Chapter 3. Zach, dinner's ready, Dinah calls from the kitchen. Coming, hun, Zach replies, folding his newspaper and making his way out of the study. Dinah glances up from the table and smiles as she sees the familiar newspaper in Zach's hand. You must have read that 1,000,000 times before printing, and yet here you are, reading it again, she teases, shaking her head. You have no idea of the hell we went through to get this issue out, Zach says with a weary chuckle. We nearly gave up on publishing anything at all today. Dinah sets their plates on the table, and as they sit down to eat, they recite in unison, Long live Freedom State, long live Mr. President, before digging into their meal. I understand. None of us ever thought things would turn out like this, Dinah says softly. I loved page 3. Mr. President, he's just brilliant. We all know that the enemy played dirty like they always do. I know deep down that. She pauses, holding back tears. Zach gently brushes her hand. I know Mr. President is our savior. When he says we'll be avenged, we will, Dinah said passionately. I know, hun. I'm so proud of the leader we have. He's truly a blessing, Zach says. Dinah wipes her tears, smiling at Zach. And I'm proud to be at the forefront of this movement. I'll make sure every step of our revenge is recorded and published. Our people need that hope, Zach adds. I'm so proud of you, honey, Dinah says softly. Make Mr. President proud. And Paul too. Zach sighs. The office just isn't the same without him. He died a hero, Dinah says firmly, and Mr. President will make sure Paul and all of Freedom State gets the vengeance they deserve. Lisa called me, Zach says. She said Paul left something for me. I'll pass by her after work tomorrow. No problem, honey. I'll check on her too sometime this week, Dinah says, turning to the newspaper and flipping to page 3, her expression softening. Hi there, story lover. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe, comment and like, and stay tuned for part 2 of Freedom State, which will be uploaded soon. Thank you.